40,000 years ago, someone scratched a few tiny lines and dots onto a piece of bone, and that little mark might be the oldest hard drive humanity ever created. Scientists now believe those Ice Age people weren't just doodling, but recording real information, structured, organized, repeatable data. And this discovery completely shifts the timeline of human intelligence. For decades, archaeologists kept finding strange symbols carved into Stone Age tools and sculptures. Those were simple shapes like crosses, dots, short lines, and tiny notches cut into bone or ivory. Explorers kept finding them in caves across Europe, including Germany, France, and Spain. They showed up on carved animal figurines, tools, and ornaments. Archaeologists dated them to be about 34,000 to 45,000 years old. That means people created these symbols during the Ice Age, when glaciers covered huge chunks of the planet, and mammoths still wandered the plains. For a long time, researchers believed these signs meant nothing in particular, maybe decorations, maybe tribal art. But a new computational study led by a linguist and an archaeologist showed it was more about data than decoration. The team analyzed more than 3,000 individual symbols carved into around 260 artifacts. They studied every mark and fed them into statistical models, the same type of mathematics researchers use to study language patterns or train artificial intelligence. The goal wasn't to translate the signs yet. Nobody knows exactly what they mean. Instead, the scientists looked at something called information density, which means how much meaningful data you can store in a sequence of symbols. When the researchers ran the numbers, they saw that the symbol sequences had almost the same information density as Proto-Cuneiform. That's the earliest writing system known from ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. It was roughly 40,000 years later. So, some signs in these Ice Age carvings repeat again and again in predictable ways: cross, 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 line, line, dot. That repetition resembles early data encoding, where patterns repeat because they store structured information. The researchers also analyzed the entropy of the coded messages. Entropy measures how unpredictable a sequence is. High entropy means lots of possible combinations, like a complex password. Low entropy means predictable repetition, and it looks like the Ice Age symbol systems have entropy levels very close to early Proto-Cuneiform tablets. That means the amount of information those carvings could store roughly matches the earliest writing records from the first cities. It proves that humans didn't just suddenly invent writing out of nowhere 5,000 years ago. Instead, humans spent tens of thousands of years experimenting with symbolic encoding systems and gradually increased their complexity until true writing was finally invented. One of the most interesting examples of such a coded message comes from a cave in southwestern Germany. Archaeologists discovered a tiny mammoth figurine carved from mammoth tusk ivory, small enough to fit in your palm. There's a neat row of engraved crosses and dots running along its surface. Another object, called the adorant, is a thin ivory plate. Found in a different German cave, has a strange mythical creature that looks part human, part lion on it. The figure stretches upward like it's worshipping something, and across its body, someone carved rows of tiny dots and notches with careful spacing. Then there's the famous lion-human sculpture. If you look at the arm closely, you can see evenly spaced cuts along the limb. These marks seem intentional, deliberate, almost rhythmic. They look less like decoration and more like entries in a ledger. It makes those artifacts something like USB drives made of ivory. And because these ancient USB drives appear in different regions of Germany and in other parts of Europe, it could mean that Ice Age humans may have shared such symbolic messages across huge distances. Those hunter-gatherers living thousands of miles apart probably recognized the same patterns scratched into bone tools. Of course, scientists still don't know the exact meaning of these symbols. They could represent seasonal calendars, migration cycles, clan markers, or some concepts tied to rituals. So the most important discovery for now isn't the translation, but the structure of the signs that behave like a system. This coding system isn't the only proof that ancient minds invented complex systems long before modern technology arrived. There's a thick oval slab of limestone in a museum in the Netherlands. Archaeologists dug it up in the late 1800s and assumed it was some kind of Roman game board. The problem was that nobody could figure out the rules. The carved lines didn't match any known ancient game. Only in 2026, researchers finally solved the mystery with help from artificial intelligence. If you look at the stone closely, you can see that certain grooves on it are slightly deeper than others. It means that people slid pieces across those lines repeatedly, and the stone wore down over time. Conservation experts created extremely detailed 3D scans of the limestone surface to analyze those wear patterns. Those scans showed differences in depth smaller than a human hair. Every tiny groove became a clue about how players once moved their pieces. Then, the team brought in a special AI game simulation system designed to understand board games. They fed the system rules from about 100 historical games and asked it to test possibilities onto a digital copy of the Roman board. The AI played thousands of simulated matches against itself and tried different rule combinations each time. For every rule set, it tracked where the pieces moved and compared those paths to the wear patterns on the real stone. It repeated this process around 1,000 times per rule set until finally certain patterns started lining up perfectly. The system narrowed all the possibilities to a small group of related blocking games. In this type of strategy game, two players move pieces along fixed paths, trying to trap the opponent's pieces in corners or dead ends. If you've ever played tic-tac-toe or checkers, you already understand the basic idea. To control space, predict the opponent's next move, and close the trap. The simulations showed that the Romans most likely played this game with small tokens made of glass, bone, or pottery sliding along those carved grooves. And that discovery matters more than you might think. Historians used to believe blocking games appeared in early medieval Europe, centuries after the Roman Empire collapsed. But this limestone board showed them that such games existed nearly 1,000 years earlier. So, Roman players had strategy games that helped them develop forward planning, recognizing patterns, and thinking of different combinations and possibilities. Now let's travel even further back in time, long before Roman cities and writing of any kind. Our destination, Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania, one of the oldest important archaeological sites on Earth. In 2025, researchers studying the area found something unexpected in ancient sediments. It was a set of tools made from the limb bones of elephants and hippos. And these tools date back about 1.5 million years. Scientists found 27 bone tools, some nearly 15 inches long, shaped into sharp blades. Early humans most likely used them on animal carcasses or to process tough materials. At first glance, they seem simple, but it actually looks like the toolmakers shaped these bones using knapping, the same process used to chip stone tools. Knapping means striking a material carefully so that small flakes break away, gradually forming a sharp edge. Bone behaves very differently from stone. It contains collagen, which makes it slightly flexible and elastic. Hit the bone too hard and it shatters unpredictably. Hit it too softly and nothing happens. That means whoever made these tools understood how the material worked. They adapted their technique to shape bone without destroying it. Archaeologists believe Homo erectus, an early human species with body proportions similar to ours, created these implements. It also looks like the toolmakers preferred thick limb bones, which are the strongest parts of animal skeleton. To make that choice, you need to understand anatomy and material strength. Engineers today still use that same logic when choosing materials for machines. When we put all these discoveries together, we see that our ancestors designed systems, invented technologies, stored information, and played complex games long before modern civilization appeared. So we didn't just suddenly become intelligent. We've been building knowledge for tens of thousands of years. Footsteps pounded behind him, heart racing. He lunged toward the towering statue, fingers fumbling with the hidden crevice. No time. He shoved it inside just as shouts closed in. A deep breath, loud heartbeat. Then he ran, vanishing into the dark, leaving his secret buried in stone, waiting to be found. Throughout history, statues haven't just been silent guardians of the past. They've been hiding places for secrets, some deliberately sealed away, others stumbled upon by pure chance. See the most mysterious of them, In 2016, as Australian experts prepared a 645-year-old statue for auction, they uncovered a hidden secret: an ancient banknote tucked inside its hollowed head. Issued in 1371 under Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang, the note was worth 1,000 copper coins, or 28 grams of silver. More strikingly, it carried a grim warning. Despite passing through multiple owners, the hidden bill remained undiscovered for centuries. A rare relic from an era when paper money was still a novelty, the note was soon listed for auction, its journey through time continuing into the modern world. Statues became more than just symbols. They were guardians, keepers of history, and sometimes even life-saving tools. In 2017, restoration experts working on an 18th century statue in Spain made a remarkable discovery. Hidden within the statue's hollow interior were 2 letters written in 1777, providing insights into daily life, local customs, and the economy of the time. Similarly, in 2023, during renovations at the United States Military Academy in West Point, a box was discovered inside the marble base of a statue depicting the hero Tadeusz Kosciuszko. Placed there nearly 200 years ago, this time capsule offers a tangible connection to the institution's storied past. The mystery surrounding statues and their potential to hide secrets extends to some of the world's most iconic monuments. Few places are as shrouded in mystery as the Great Sphinx of Giza. For centuries, archaeologists, historians, and explorers have speculated about what might lie hidden beneath its massive limestone figure. Some people thought the Sphinx concealed the legendary Hall of Records, a supposed library containing ancient knowledge, possibly even lost wisdom from Atlantis. In recent years, advancements in ground-penetrating radar technology have revealed voids beneath the Sphinx, leading many to believe that the statue may hide undiscovered chambers or passageways, some possibly linked to royal tombs or hidden structures. The potential of hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx has captivated imaginations for generations. But what is perhaps even more intriguing is the recent work done by researchers from New York University, who studied the environmental forces that shaped the Sphinx. After recreating ancient wind patterns, the researchers concluded that the Sphinx may have originally been shaped by natural erosion before humans further refined its form. Such revelations open up new avenues for understanding the monument's purpose, as well as the cultural and spiritual significance it held back then. The ancient Egyptians revered Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of power and the Nile, and often mummified crocodiles to honor him. These creatures were placed in temples or tombs as offerings to the gods or to ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. Recently, a group of researchers dove into an interesting study about a crocodile that received the mummification treatment from Egyptian embalmers. They used a CT scanner to uncover all sorts of fascinating details about how this crocodile met its maker and what happened to its body afterward. For the ancient Egyptians, animals weren't just pets, they were major players in their rituals, acting as a bridge between humans and the deities. Hawks, for example, were associated with Horus, the sun deity, since their flight brought them closer to the sun. Cats were linked to Bastet, the fierce and protective mother deity. Crocodiles were among the favorite animals for mummification. These reptiles were seen as symbols of Sobek, the lord of the Nile, whose presence announced the annual flooding that brought much-needed water and fertile soil for farming. In the past, studying such artifacts could mean damaging the mummy, but thanks to modern imaging techniques, the researchers were able to examine the crocodile while keeping it intact. X-rays and CT scans revealed that the crocodile's digestive system was packed with small stones called gastroliths, which crocs often ingest to aid digestion and maintain buoyancy. Amid those stones, they even found a metal fish hook and a fish. This suggests that large mummified crocodiles were likely caught in the wild using hooks baited with fish. This almost aligns with what ancient Greek historians wrote about life in Egypt. almost because the Greeks believed that Egyptians used pigs to lure the crocodiles. So, as you've noticed, researchers and archaeologists use cutting-edge technology and meticulous hands-on work to uncover the secrets of ancient civilizations. The process begins with surveys using ground-penetrating radar and 3D scanning to detect hidden chambers, tunnels, or anomalies beneath the surface. Once a promising site is identified, careful excavation begins. Layers of soil and debris are removed slowly, ensuring that no detail is lost. The exhibition of Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam features a remarkable 15th century Tibetan gilt copper statue of Guhya Samaja Akshobhya. This figure, symbolizing the unity of opposing forces and a higher state of enlightenment, was previously unknown to the museum's collection. Recent examinations of this statue have revealed hidden relics and scrolls within its hollow structure, offering profound insights into the religious practices of the time. The exhibition showcases over 75 masterpieces from Asia, including the newly acquired Guhya Samaja Akshobhya statue, highlighting the intricate craftsmanship and spiritual significance embedded within such artifacts. In the heart of Verona, a secret lay hidden for decades within the bronze statue of Juliet. Sculpted in 1969, she became a symbol of love, touched by countless visitors seeking romance and luck. But beneath her worn surface, Juliet was silently guarding something extraordinary. Over time, tiny cracks formed from years of affectionate caresses. Through them, lovers slipped letters, whispered confessions, desperate pleas, and eternal promises. Some tossed in keys, sealing their love with padlocks and hiding the proof inside her hollow frame. In 2014, restoration experts made a stunning discovery. As they worked to mend the statue, hundreds of love notes and rusted keys spilled out, forgotten vows locked away in the heart of Juliet herself. Statues often act as symbols of power and might. However, in more recent times, statues have also been used to convey messages for future generations. The concept of the time capsule, an object or collection of items placed in a container, sealed, and then buried or hidden for later discovery, has a long history. And in modern times, statues have served as the perfect vessels for these capsules, allowing people to communicate with future generations in a very tangible way. In 2014, as old workers carefully removed the golden lion atop Boston's Old State House for restoration, they made a startling discovery. Something rattled inside its hollow head. A Boston Globe article from 1901 had once mentioned a hidden time capsule, but over the years it had faded into legend. Then, a sculptor's descendant unearthed a long-forgotten letter confirming the truth. Inside the lion's head lay newspapers, photographs, autographs, and letters from Boston's past. Messages sealed away for over a century. As the capsule was opened, it felt like history itself was holding its breath. The officials planned to continue the tradition, adding modern artifacts before sealing the lion's secret once more, until the 22nd century unveils it again. We don't know if they carry on with it, though. Advancements in imaging technology have allowed researchers to uncover hidden details within famous sculptures without damaging them. In 2014, restoration experts in Mexico made a shocking discovery while examining a 300-year-old wooden statue. Real human teeth were hidden beneath its serene face. The revelation came not by sight, but by technology. When preservationists took an X-ray of the statue, expecting to find structural details, they instead saw a perfect set of teeth embedded in the mouth. Unlike other historic statues from the region, which sometimes contained real hair people donated to the statues, this discovery was completely unexpected.
The ancient Indian texts mention beautifully decorated chariots or entire palaces called vimanas that could take off and, in a matter of seconds, fly away as far as space. Some people believe these vimanas only existed in Indian mythology, but it's also possible that they were based on a real technology that had been lost over the centuries. According to the Vedas, ancient Indian religious texts, there was the elephant vimana with several engines and many other types named after animals and birds. There was one for local travel, one for visiting different countries, and one for traveling to the moon and various planets. They could develop a great speed. One vimana had the superpower of invisibility. Another one was shaped like a sphere and was built on the winds produced by Mercury. This vimana was said to generate an enormous ray like the sun and make noise like the storm's thunder. All the vimanas were unbreakable and perfect for attacks on foes. Now, to operate a vimana, you'd need to know a lot of stuff, pretty much like today's airplane pilots, 32 secrets in total. They'd cover the aircraft structure and the secrets of taking off and maneuvering without crashing. That's a good thing. The pilot was also expected to know how to be seen and unseen, how to be hidden, how to be quick, how to manage contractions and expansion, and many other tricks. To hide the flying machine from foes, the pilot was instructed to move to the 8th atmospheric layer above the Earth and use the power of dark solar rays. This instruction might sound a bit weird, but there were others, more realistic ones, which still make sense in modern aeronautics. There are sections of ancient texts on the vimanas that focus on details like flight paths, pilot training, navigation, and even suitable clothes for pilots and recommended food for long flights. There was also a lot of technical detail about the use of heat-absorbing metals, the metals utilized, and melting points. The supporters of the theory that the vimanas were more than just myths are sure that the ancient Indians would unlikely go into all these details just for a beautiful story. So, the flying palaces might have been real and way ahead of their time, like many other great Indian inventions. Back in the 6th century BCE, an Indian physician named Sushruta basically wrote the original guide to medicine and surgery. They even called him the father of surgery for his work. Sushruta laid down the details on hundreds of medicinal plants and described complex surgical procedures. He gave instructions on nose reconstructions and skin transplants from one part of the body to another. The original method of rhinoplasty, which involved taking a piece of skin from the forehead to reconstruct the nose, is still used today. But back then, it had a slightly different purpose than surprising your followers on social media. Those nose jobs helped out folks who had lost their noses as punishment for crimes or in fights. Now, you gotta thank an ancient Indian math prodigy for the invention of zero. It might not seem like a big deal, but without it, we would have no binary system and no computers. People before the 5th century CE were only thinking about some sort of a sign to indicate nothing. The invention made addition, subtraction, and other mathematical operations a whole lot easier. You can see the oldest zero in existence carved in the wall of a temple in Gwalior, India. The Indus Valley Civilization was using rulers in 1500 BCE and earlier. Made from ivory, these rulers were found during excavations in what is present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. They were widely used in architecture with amazing accuracy. They had units corresponding to slightly over 1 inch that were marked with precise subdivisions within 5/1000ths of an inch. The next invention is more of a concept than a physical item. Standardization is all about setting the rules based on a bunch of people, things, or interests. One of its cool applications that we've all gotten used to is standard weights. Whether you're using pounds or kilograms, you need these universal measurements for weight, right? For this, we owe a big shout-out to the merchants from the Indus Valley Civilization who lived around 4,000 years ago. They were measuring everything from food grains to fancy luxury goods using these standardized weights. And their weights had decimal and binary mathematical systems going on. They didn't have high-tech gear, but they pulled off some serious precision using complex calculations and even sand for construction. Their art of standardization made its way to Persia and Central Asia, basically becoming the global weight-watching standard. So, if yoga is your go-to exercise, you definitely have a personal reason to appreciate the ancient Indian geniuses. Over 5,000 years ago, during the rule of the Indus-Sarasvati civilization in northern India, yoga was first mentioned in the Vedas. Yoga was refined and shaped over the centuries until it grew into a massive teaching with over 200 sacred writings dedicated to this way of obtaining enlightenment. At the beginning of the current era, yoga got a new trajectory thanks to a Hindu writer who laid down a system of yoga in his text, the Yoga Sutras. It became a whole-body rejuvenation, a life-extending practice with poses that you are still doing on the mat today. Yoga has reached the Western world only in the 19th century, and it caught on like wildfire. Chess, the all-time top game for intellectuals, is also an Indian invention. Its ancestor was called Chaturanga, and it was a strategic board game that started gaining popularity around 3,000 years before the current era. This early Indian version of chess was played by 4 people, not 2, and had 64 squares. Each player had 8 pieces, ranging from pawns to kings, bishops to knights. And there was no standard 6-faced dice. They rolled with an oblong one. Players facing off were actually allies, forming 2 teams based on the direction they sat. Chess, that we know and love today, was first mentioned in ancient Indian literature in a legend. It said that the wife of a villain called Ravana had invented the game to amuse him. Now, the word shampoo comes from the Hindi word, which means to soothe or knead. The substance was invented in India in 1762 and was originally used for head massages, hence the name. The first shampoo was made of natural oils and herbs. British traders fell in love with the idea and brought it back with them to England. It took years for the original head massage oil to evolve into shampoo as we know it today, but it's still an Indian invention. Unlike the ancient Greeks, who wore animal skins, the Indians started cultivating cotton back in the 5th and 4th centuries before the current era. They used cotton threads to produce fabrics that soon became a huge hit in the Mediterranean and beyond. Jute and wool also have their origins in India. Cashmere, the finest and most exclusive type of wool, actually comes from the Kashmir region of India. Buttons that sit proudly on that cashmere cardigan of yours also have ancient Indian origins. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indus Valley civilization started cutting seashells into geometric shapes with tiny holes in them. First, they were just decorations, but then people started using them to fasten clothes. Now, when you think about radio communication pioneers, Marconi's name usually steals the spotlight. He got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for his groundbreaking radio work. But there's an unsung hero in the radio waves game, and his name is Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. He spilled the beans on radio communication way back in 1895. He shot an electromagnetic wave across 75 feet at the town hall in Calcutta, and it went through walls, rang a bell, and even set off some gunpowder. Marconi took a page from Bose's book, using his invention, the Mercury Coherer, as a blueprint for his own two-way radio. Bose didn't patent his genius creation, so he only got his credit a century later. We know that the ancient Egyptians were talented enough to build something as grand as the pyramids, but were they also smart enough to measure the speed of light? There's a theory circulating online that says exactly that. If you look at these 2 numbers, you'll see that they match completely. The first one is the speed of light in a vacuum measured in meters, and the second one is the latitude of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So, was it done on purpose, or is it just a coincidence? Well, happily, we can tell you that it's actually just a coincidence, not another conspiracy thingy. The Great Pyramid is just one of the many places in the world that share the same latitude. And more importantly, even if the ancient Egyptians had somehow measured the speed of light and chosen to keep it a secret from the rest of the world, they wouldn't have used meters to put it down. Meters were only defined at the end of the 18th century. The builders of the pyramids used a different unit of measure called cubits. 1 cubit is equal to 1.5 feet. Cubit was based on the length of the arm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, and it became popular in the ancient world. So if they wanted to impress the rest of the world and set the pyramids at a point that matched the speed of light in cubits, they would have to build their iconic constructions somewhere in Europe. And then the Danish astronomer who first measured the speed of light in 1676 would have been really upset to know that someone had done it centuries before him. So although they were ahead of their time in many aspects, the ancient Egyptians never measured the speed of light or used longitude and latitude to map their locations. The base of the Great Pyramid of Giza might seem like a perfect square, but it's actually an 8-sided structure, not 4-sided. Each of its 4 sides has a subtle concave indentation that splits it evenly from base to tip. The official version is that a British pilot was the first to notice it in 1940 while flying over the pyramid. He took a photograph that showed shadows highlighting these indentations. Some people think these lines are only visible from above and can best be seen at dawn and dusk during the spring and autumn equinoxes. This has led to a freaky theory that the ancient Egyptians might have designed the pyramids to communicate with something looking at them from above. Now, the Great Pyramid is one of only 3 pyramids that used to have a swivel door. It weighed around 20 tons, but they could still easily open it from the inside. Its precise fit made it nearly invisible from the outside, with no visible latch or handle. There were only slight variations in the exterior stone that gave out an opening. The other 2 pyramids with similar doors belonged to Khufu's father and grandfather. The Great Pyramid also has a hidden void at least 100 feet long that was only found in 2017. We still don't know what lies within the space, what purpose it served, or if it is the only space of its kind. Researchers used the same tech to see through cathedral walls, Mayan pyramids, and even volcanoes. It depends on a natural shower of subatomic particles called muons. They pass more easily through empty space than through solid materials. So if they arrange multiple muon detectors around a structure, scientists can map out its solid and empty areas. A team of scientists placed muon detectors inside the Great Pyramid and allowed them to gather data for months. Scientists have analyzed samples of the mortar used to build the pyramids many times. Although we know its composition, modern technology still can't replicate it. The mortar is mostly made from processed gypsum, but it wasn't used like the cement we use for bricks today. Instead, they used it to support the joints between the massive stones as they were set in place. The estimated amount they needed to construct the Great Pyramid was around 500,000 tons of mortar. The gypsum mortar is stronger than the stones themselves and has held up for thousands of years. Now, all 4 sides of the Great Pyramid are aligned with the cardinal points – north, south, east, and west. According to geologist and engineer Glenn Dash, the alignment is accurate to within 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15 of a degree. The architects managed to achieve this without modern tools like drones, blueprints, or computers. Many researchers try to explain this construction miracle. Maybe they used the pole star or the sun's shadow. Dash recently proposed a new, simpler idea. The Egyptians might have used the autumnal equinox to align the pyramids. It happens twice a year when the Earth's equator passes through the center of the sun's disk, making day and night nearly equal in length. To test his theory, Dash conducted an experiment on the 22nd of September 2016, the first day of the fall equinox. He used a special rod the Egyptians had to cast a shadow and tracked its tip at regular intervals, forming a smooth curve. By connecting 2 points of the curve with a taut string, he created an almost perfect east-west line. Dash noted that on the equinox, the shadow's tip runs in a straight line, nearly perfectly east-west, and with a slight counterclockwise error. There's a similar error in the pyramids. Although his experiment was conducted in Connecticut, Dash believes that the same method would work in Egypt. All the ancient Egyptians needed was a clear, sunny day. They could determine the fall equinox by counting 91 days from the summer solstice. But they left us few clues, and no engineering documents or architectural plans have been found that explain their methods. So they might have mapped shadows, but it's not definite. Now, scientists have long wondered how heavy stone blocks were carried to the pyramid sites, and they might finally have an answer. A research team from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, has discovered that 31 pyramids are likely to have been built along a long-lost ancient branch of the River Nile. It's now hidden under desert and farmland. For many years, archaeologists have thought that ancient Egyptians must have used a nearby waterway to transport materials, equipment, people, and whatever else they needed to build the pyramids on the river. But up until now, they weren't certain of the location, shape, size, or proximity of this waterway to the site of the pyramids. The group of researchers used radar satellite imagery, historical maps, geophysical surveys, and sediment coring to map the river branch. They believe it was buried by a major drought and sandstorms thousands of years ago. The team managed to go below the sand surface and get images of some hidden features thanks to radar technology. They found hidden rivers and ancient structures running at the foothills of where most of the ancient Egyptian pyramids lie. The discovery of this extinct river branch helps explain the high pyramid density between Giza and Lisht, in what is now an inhospitable area of the Sahara Desert. Now, Egypt isn't the only country with the most pyramids in the world. The champion's title here goes to its southern neighbor, Sudan. It has between 200 and 255 pyramids, compared to Egypt's measly 138. They were built by members of the Kingdom of Kush, an ancient civilization that ruled the lands along the Nile River many years ago. They started erecting pyramids around 500 years after the Egyptians had stopped doing it. Their pyramids are much smaller than the Egyptian ones, but were built for the same purposes. Archaeologists are still working to find out how the pyramids in the Sudan were built, how long it took to complete them, and what happened to their society. Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Göbekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Göbekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period, around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you may be wondering, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travel's just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple Complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka. Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun. the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Saqqara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Djoser and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Djoser has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Göbekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of 2 main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-Daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Xigantia Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of 2 megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Xigantia means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The Sahara Desert is home to highly dangerous creatures like the death stalker scorpion and the desert horned viper, but they're nothing compared to a mysterious beast that lived there 95 million years ago. Scientists just found a new dinosaur species in the Sahara Desert of Niger. His official name is Spinosaurus mirabilis, and let's just say you wouldn't want to cross paths with him. This beast was as long as a school bus and weighed several tons. He was a massive, powerful predator. His whole body was built to hunt. He used a trap-like jaw to catch the largest fish prehistoric Africa had to offer. His bottom teeth actually poked outward, fitting perfectly between his top teeth to create a tight grip. Once those jaws closed and trapped fish, they couldn't get away. His name, mirabilis, actually means astonishing in Latin. And that's because this dinosaur was a showstopper. He had a really flashy, weird feature. A tall, I mean really tall, crest on his head. It was so big, the researchers actually had to go back to the site and gather more pieces just to make sense of it. Today, it's all just bones, but the team thinks that when he was alive, that crest was brightly colored. It curved up toward the sky like a glowing blade. And being that flashy had one main goal: to attract mates. It worked just like peacocks with their long, bright tails. It's all about showing off for their love interests. At least, that's what researchers think. This discovery is huge because it's only the second Spinosaurus species we've ever found, like the one that starred in Jurassic Park 3. These guys were among the biggest terrestrial carnivores of the late Cretaceous period. That is, meat-eating dinosaurs that lived about 100 to 66 million years ago. They were as huge and fierce as the famous T-Rex. For a long time, most people thought Spinosaurus were aquatic hunters, and we pictured this fierce monster stalking the shore or diving deep to hunt. Some research even suggests their long spines on the tail were basically built-in flippers. But that's not what most scientists believe anymore. New studies show that while the paddle-like tail looks great for swimming, it didn't actually have much muscle. It turns out those tails were likely just for show, kind of like a lizard tail. They just didn't have the power to push such a massive creature through the water. The density of their bones didn't help either. The bottom line is, they wouldn't have been terrible swimmers. They were super slow and couldn't really dive. To give you an idea, if we put this dinosaur next to a crocodile in a pool for a swimming competition, the crocodile would win every single time. Whether they were swimmers or not, scientists seem to agree on one thing: these guys loved the sea. Most of their fossils were found along the North African coast. But then, the mirabilis species showed up and totally changed the game. These were found in the Sahara, where there isn't a drop of water in sight today. Back then, this spot was about 300 to 600 miles away from the nearest ocean. So what's the story here? Is this actually a Spinosaurus? Well, it sure is. And the way scientists actually tracked it down in the middle of the desert is pretty interesting. Because for over 70 years, the main clue was right there. Easy to find, but everyone missed it. Back in the 1950s, some French geologists were out in the desert looking for uranium. While they were searching, they stumbled upon these massive bones poking out of the sand at a place called Gadoufawa. Nearby at another spot called Acaraz, a geologist named Hugues Faure found a different fossil site. He found teeth that looked a lot like the ones from a Carcharodontosaurus, which was a massive carnivorous dinosaur. He wrote down one single line about it in his notes, and that was basically it. For some reason that nobody can explain, those notes just sat there. No one took them seriously or even bothered to go back to that site for decades. It wasn't until 2019 that a team led by Paul Sereno from the University of Chicago decided to finally follow that old lead. They basically turned it into a high-stakes treasure hunt. They headed out there, and a local Tuareg man led Sereno's team on motorbikes deep into the Sahara. He took them to a site called Djenguebe, where he remembered seeing fossilized bones a long time ago. Because it was such a long trek back to their main camp, the team didn't have much time. They could only grab a few fossils, mostly teeth and pieces of jawbones, before they had to leave. At that moment, they had no idea they were holding a brand new species in their hands. The team finally headed back there in 2022, and this time, they found even more fossils. That's when they finally put together the 40-foot-long find. And then they were able to confirm three big things. First, this new creature had a really tall and unusual crest on its head. Second, the way the teeth were set was a bit different from its famous relatives. And then we come to the biggest difference of all. For the first time ever, we're seeing a Spinosaurus that lived far from the ocean. But that raises a big question. How did it eat fish? Scientists have a theory. All those bones were found buried in the sediments of an ancient river. That means this dinosaur probably hunted for fish in shallow water. It was big and strong enough to wade into water over 6 feet deep, but it probably spent most of its time in shallow water, just waiting for a big fish to swim by. But if it didn't feel like sushi dinner, it could just wander through the woods and pluck something else to eat. Okay, so you're probably a little confused right now. I'm talking about forests and rivers. But wasn't this thing found in the middle of a desert? Well, the thing is, the Sahara looked completely different back then. It was actually green. The whole landscape was full of rivers and forests while these dinosaurs were roaming around. So that pretty much solves that mystery. But there are still plenty of other questions about this species, like how big they actually were. See, the problem is that the bones we found belonged to a young dinosaur, not a full-grown adult. Estimates say that the creature was probably about 26 feet long when he lost his life, but he could have grown a whole lot bigger than that. That leads us to the second mystery. Because this dinosaur was so huge and looked so unique, scientists have been arguing for years about how much time it actually spent in the water. One theory is that they went through 3 big evolutionary phases. First, way back in the Jurassic period, they started developing these long, crocodile-like snouts. They were perfect for catching fish. Second, during the early Cretaceous, they really started running the show. They moved toward the sea and became the top predators along the ancient coastlines. The final phase happened right as the Atlantic Ocean was opening up. This is when they reached their record-breaking size. They basically became shallow water ambush specialists, sticking mostly to North Africa and South America. But their reign didn't last forever. Around 95 million years ago, there were abrupt changes in the climate and the sea levels increased a lot. Basically, that affected the habitat they lived in, pushing them to the brink. Eventually, their story came to an end. Unfortunately, these new fossils are only part of the puzzle. We still don't know the whole story about Spinosaurus. There might even be other species out there just waiting to be discovered. And to really understand these mysterious giants, we'll have to wait until we find more complete skeletons out in the field.
Whenever you hear about ancient ruins, you almost never picture them being suspended somewhere, or just randomly hanging on the branch of a tree, right? In fact, for most of the ancient artifacts we have exposed in museums all over the world, archaeologists did quite an impressive amount of digging. You see, buildings have this funny way of fading away over time if not properly taken care of. Sometimes we need to reuse some building materials, so an older construction may be sacrificed in the process. Other times, houses are abandoned, and once they are exposed to the elements on the surface, like rain or sunlight, they don't really stand a chance. Some just simply crumble away due to good old erosion. So the only way a piece of architecture can survive the test of time is if it's somehow gotten buried deep down. Now, how did they end up buried in the first place? Well, it's quite the comedy of errors. Ancient cities had a habit of gradually raising their ground level like a kid adding toppings to their ice cream sundae. You see, these settlements were always busy collecting food and building materials to keep up with their ever-growing population. But hey, who has time to deal with waste and rubbish? It wasn't exactly high on their to-do list back in the day. So when it came to building new houses, ancient civilizations found it much easier to save their sweat and tears by piling up the rubble and constructing right on top. But that's not all. Rivers would also occasionally flood and deposit a layer of sediment on the city floors, further encapsulating those ancient constructions. And in those dry regions like the desert, where the wind likes to show off its sand and dust dance moves, you can bet it was a constant struggle to keep the establishments clean. One hilarious example is the Sphinx, which had its head buried in sand until a group of archaeologists unearthed it in 1817. Some ancient towns eventually got covered up because they were completely abandoned. With less human activity to control their expansion, plant seeds couldn't resist the opportunity and sprouted all over the place. They gobbled up carbon dioxide from the air and grew, adding more and more bulk to the ground. Those cheeky roots even decided to stabilize the soil made from decaying plant matter, creating layers upon layers of earthy goodness. It's like the ultimate DIY project Mother Nature embarked on, with plants as her loyal helpers. The act of digging into the secrets of ancient civilizations is not just about unearthing a lost world. It's also an epic quest to reveal the hidden treasures beneath layers of history. But how do archaeologists know where to dig in the first place? If everything is covered in layers upon layers of sediments, debris, and plant roots, they must have some sort of system they rely on before embarking on a new project, right? For starters, they're not always the ones suggesting an archaeological dig in a certain location. Let me explain. Let's say you're a contractor and you want to build a new fancy apartment complex in your city. Some local legislations have certain requirements before your project can start, though. For instance, before anyone starts building on a piece of land, they might need to bring in specialists to check the soil. These clever folks can be archaeologists, geologists, or paleontologists, and they need to keep an eye on things during development. If any artifacts or ecofacts, fancy word for organic remnants, are discovered, these experts swoop in to excavate and study them. But what about sites that have nothing to do with bulldozers and yellow hats? Archaeologists have more than one trick up their sleeves when it comes to locating ancient hotspots. They dive deep into historic records with a healthy dose of detective work. By sniffing out old documents and maps, they can piece together the puzzle of human activity in a specific area. If a site has been visited before, it's even better. Finding records of past excavations or historical accounts can give archaeologists lots of information on where to continue their treasure hunt. Before archaeologists start swinging their shovels, they engage in a bit of a visual scan mission. Armed with a grid system, they'll stroll around the site, keeping their eyes peeled for any artifacts that might be hiding just beneath the Earth's upper layer. From groundstone tools to historic glass and even ancient garbage dumps, yes, they're also valuable. These keen-eyed explorers can spot signs of human activity faster than most people. If they stumble upon midden soil, fancy term for a garbage dump, they know for sure that humans once called this place home. Archaeologists don't just rely on their trusty shovels, though. They have an arsenal of gadgets to aid in their search for hidden wonders. Geophysical tools are like their secret weapons. Take the resistivity meter, for example. This clever contraption measures the electrical component of the soil and any buried features or artifacts. A buried wall, for instance, will create a different resistivity reading than the surrounding soil. Magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar work in similar ways, showcasing potential hints of ancient treasures in the soil. And who could forget our trusty old friend, the GPS? It helps archaeologists map out precise locations, like a high-tech treasure map, leading them straight to their pot of gold. Care to virtually visit some of the most important archaeological sites in the world? Well, follow me. In the United Kingdom, for instance, you'll find this interesting place called Stonehenge. It's one of many henges scattered around, but this one really takes the cake. Picture this: massive ancient stones standing tall and proud, arranged in a funky outer ring and an inner horseshoe, with some smaller stones thrown in for good measure. And guess what? These amazing stones have been around for over 5,000 years. Talk about a serious case of rock-solid longevity. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to local folklore, the legendary wizard Merlin whipped out his magic wand and poof! He teleported these massive stones all the way from Ireland. Apparently, some giants had assembled them there, but Merlin decided they would look much better at their new location. Others think it's just the ruined remains of an old Roman spiritual edifice. These amazing structures were built by our Bronze Age ancestors. With their simple tools and limited tech, they managed to create this monumental masterpiece. Impressive, right? Unfortunately, there's still so much we don't know about this area. Stonehenge's initial purpose remains a mystery to this day. Sure, there are lots of theories, but scientists have yet to agree on the subject. However, we do know that it's perfectly aligned to catch the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices. The ancient city of Pompeii is an equally amazing archaeological site. Picture this: Mount Vesuvius, a notorious troublemaker, decided to throw a volcanic tantrum and completely covered this ancient Roman city. It turned it into a time capsule, located outside present-day Naples in Italy. Fast forward to the year 1748, when a bunch of adventurous explorers stumbled upon Pompeii. Lo and behold, they discovered a treasure trove of well-preserved goodies: streets, houses, food. Probably a bit stale by then. Blingy jewelry, fancy sculptures, colorful frescoes, everyday household items, and even animal and human remains. It was like an epic archaeological party. From the looks of it, Pompeii had it all. Fancy houses and villas, a massive 20,000-seat arena, cute little artisan shops, hangouts like taverns. And let's not forget the saucy spots like those luxurious bathhouses for some intense pampering. There's also the sanctuary of Apollo, where people used to gather for their daily dose of worship. And of course, the bustling heart of the city, the Forum of Pompeii, where all the cool people used to hang out. And guess what? Pompeii is so cool that it made it to UNESCO's World Heritage List back in 1997. That's like the ultimate Hall of Fame for historical awesomeness. It also includes many other famous buildings and sites, like the Taj Mahal in India and the Acropolis of Athens in Greece.
Archaeologists in Panama kept finding chiefs covered in gold under a plain sunburned field. Weird enough, then they found chief regalia so small it could only belong to a child. That discovery shifted the interpretation of the site. El Caño was no longer just a rich ceremonial site. It looked more like a place where power could pass from one generation to the next. And now, a newly opened chamber there has expanded that picture. El Caño stands apart from the usual ancient gold story. The newest chamber, dated to around AD 800 to 1000, didn't just produce shiny artifacts. It added another piece to a much larger pattern. Archaeologists found pottery, gold ornaments, and a central high-status person marked out by where the gold was placed. This was not random wealth in the dirt. It was a public statement about rank. The objects themselves are vivid: 2 bracelets, 2 earrings, pectoral ornaments decorated with bats and crocodiles. Those are not the kind of items someone tosses in casually. They were chosen to say something. In a world with no billboards, no spotlights, and no giant stone inscriptions, gold did the talking. It told everyone exactly who mattered most in that chamber. The location makes this even more striking. Not Egypt, not Peru, not some famous archaeological landscape packed with giant ruins, central Panama. Historically, this region was often treated as the place between the main acts of the ancient Americas, wedged between the Maya to the north and the great Andean cultures to the south. El Caño repeatedly challenges that older view. That old assumption existed for a reason. This part of Panama does not hit you like a stone-built empire. There's no skyline of huge temples, no carved dynastic walls, no dramatic ruins screaming a powerful society was here. In tropical Central America, a lot of everyday life was built in materials that don't age gracefully. Wood, thatch, fibers, skin, feathers. Most of it simply doesn't stick around for 1,000 years. So when gold survives, it becomes one of the loudest voices left. And El Caño did not give up that voice quickly. Julia Mayo's team began geophysical surveys there in 2005. By 2010, they had dug a pit about 16 feet deep and uncovered a chief covered in gold. Then the site kept escalating. More ornaments appeared. More chambers turned up. More evidence started linking this field to a whole ceremonial landscape. This was not a lucky weekend dig. It was years of slow, patient work, turning a quiet pasture into one of the biggest archaeological stories in Panama. The contrast is striking. From the surface, El Caño looks ordinary, the kind of place where you'd expect grass, cattle, and heat, not dynasties. But under that ordinary ground, archaeologists found symbols of authority designed to be seen from a distance. Polished gold would have caught the harsh sunlight. Chest ornaments likely flashed when a leader moved. Animal imagery, bats, crocodiles, and other powerful creatures turned jewelry into a visual language of authority. This was status you could spot instantly, and the newest chamber matters because it is not standing alone. Mayo said the site has produced 9 similar chambers and that this was a place where elite individuals were laid to rest for about 200 years. This finding expands the interpretation of the site. One rich chamber is interesting. A ceremonial resting ground used by powerful people across multiple generations suggests something else entirely. It begins to resemble a long-running system. You can see that system even more clearly in another major El Caño find from 2024. Archaeologists uncovered the shared chamber of an important Cocle lord buried around 750 to 800 CE. Inside were gold ornaments, ceramic objects, bells, skirts, and a set of flutes. The team dubbed him the Lord of the Flutes, which sounds almost legendary until you remember this is not a myth. It's a real person from a real ceremonial tradition found in the same site. The scale grows even larger around that burial. Researchers found many other individuals placed in the same setting. Reports said the total could reach more than 30 people. At that point, you are no longer looking at one important person with a collection of objects. You are looking at an event, a choreographed display, a message to everyone watching that this leader stood at the center of a much bigger social order. This interpretation is supported by research. A 2020 study of El Caño's multiple chambers found the same basic pattern again and again. One highest status individual in each other, people arranged around that central figure, and a strong sense that the whole composition represented social order. The authors also concluded that some of these final ceremonies involved very harsh ritual practices. The layout itself was part of the performance of power. Now go back to the child-sized regalia, because that might be the strangest clue of all. One of Mayo's earlier breakthroughs came when she realized a set of tiny gold objects was too small for an adult. They appear to have belonged to a baby adorned like a chief. Later, the team found gold arm cuffs on the skeleton of a 12-year-old boy. Both finds point in the same direction. Status here may not have been something a person earned late in life. It may have started at birth. That implication is significant. If rank passed from father to son, then El Caño was not showing us a few isolated leaders. It was revealing a hereditary power system. That means established families, succession, and rules strong enough for an entire community to recognize them. Gold-working specialists had to exist, ceremonial knowledge had to be preserved, labor had to be organized. These were not loose little villages improvising everything as they went. This was structure. It also explains why El Caño feels bigger than a treasure story. Gold draws attention first. The real subject is political sophistication. The objects are only useful because of what they reveal: hierarchy, ceremony, inherited authority, and a leadership class that could stage power in a way everyone understood. Gold is what catches your eye first. The social system is what keeps the site interesting once the shine wears off. There is another reason El Caño matters so much. Less than 2 miles away sits Sitio Conte, the older Panamanian site that had long provided the main evidence for this gold-rich tradition. For years, Sitio Conte was the big reference point. Then El Caño started turning up its own chiefs, its own ornaments, its own ceremonial patterns. Suddenly, this was not one isolated hotspot. It was a broader cultural world, hiding in plain sight across the same landscape. Once you imagine that world, El Caño becomes incredibly visual. No giant stone monuments. Fine, the ceremony can still feel huge. Flutes playing, bells moving, gold breastplates flashing, beads sewn into clothing, animal symbols broadcasting lineage and rank. One early chief found at El Caño wore gold breastplates, arm cuffs, a bracelet of bells, a belt of hollow gold beads, and more than 2,000 tiny gold spheres arranged as if sewn onto a sash. That is not subtle fashion. That is ceremonial theater. Imagine one of these final ceremonies. A leader is placed at the center, gold catches the light. Music carries across the field. Companions are arranged with strict meaning. Everyone present can read the scene without a single written word. This person held the highest place. These families mattered. This order continues even now. The point was not private grief. The point was public memory and public hierarchy. That is why El Caño changes the history of Panama in a very specific way. It does not just add one more archaeological attraction to the map, it shows that central Panama had its own powerful chiefs, its own ceremonial specialists, its own symbols of rank, and probably its own dynastic lines. This region was not just absorbing importance from bigger neighbors, it was generating its own, and the site is still making that point clearer. El Caño has already revealed multiple elite chambers across years of excavation, and each new one expands the story. So the key discovery here is not a bracelet, or an earring, or even a chamber filled with gold. It is the realization that an ordinary Panamanian field was hiding a cemetery of rulers and clues to a forgotten power system that had been there the whole time, just waiting for someone to look deeper.
We all know how it goes. Homo sapiens are way smarter than Neanderthals. Neanderthals were primitive, and we're much cooler than they were, right? Now, what comes to mind when you hear the word factory? Probably something like this. Lots of Homo sapiens, people, working in different departments, huge production lines, packaging, sorting. You can't fit a Neanderthal into that image, can you? Hey, don't be such an evolutionist. We don't judge people here by the stage of their development, okay? And by the way, Neanderthals had their own impressive factories. No conveyors or industrial robots, but pretty advanced for their time. The production line I'm talking about was located in a place we now call Germany. What's funny is that it's a country that still has plenty of factories and a long tradition of working with machinery, so it feels like a continuation of that tradition. Now, poof, back 125,000 years, to the moment when this very early factory appeared. Around this time, Earth was in an interglacial period, with weather quite similar to today's climate, so conditions may have not been the best, but still fairly comfortable. Neanderthals lived their ordinary lives. They used fire to manage vegetation, gathered plants, and apparently, built plants. Pun intended. So if you thought those hairy guys were savage beasts who spent their time scratching lice off their skin, you may owe an apology to this distinguished gentleman. By the way, this is Carl, and he claims to be the owner of this factory. You seem to have underestimated him, so he's left. But I'll carry on talking about this interglacial breakthrough. Archaeologists have recently shown that Neanderthals intentionally chose a lakeside location to process the bones of at least 172 mammals, including deer, horses, and aurochs, a now extinct species of bovine. The study demonstrates that the inhabitants not only broke open large mammal bones to extract marrow, but also ground the bones into thousands of fragments and heated them in water to extract calorie-rich bone grease. Think of it as a food manufactory making flavorful Campbell's soup ready to hit the shelves at your local supermarket. I know it sounds far-fetched, but what I want to show here is that we now have evidence that even Neanderthals had pretty advanced techniques of food processing. This was intensive, organized, and strategic. Neanderthals were clearly managing resources with precision. Some of them were planning hunts. Others were in charge of transporting carcasses, while another group was busy rendering fat in a task-specific area. They definitely had no nutritionists, but they did understand both the nutritional value of fat and how to access it efficiently. Just one example. Scientists now think that when it came down to caching carcass parts, they would do so across the landscape for later transport to the grease rendering site. You know how all factories are supposed to meet production targets? Same here. Experts believe Neanderthals understood there was a certain fat quota they needed to meet to make the literally bone-crushing process worthwhile. Now, you may say, well, it's just one example. It doesn't mean that Neanderthals were that advanced. True, good catch. However, there are more examples, and here's one of them. Technically speaking, in addition to food-related production lines, these guys may have had a chemical production factory. You see, there is evidence that Neanderthals made stone tools using a multi-ingredient adhesive, which they couldn't buy at Dollar Tree for very obvious reasons. The factory headquarters wasn't in Germany this time though, but in Gibraltar, in Vanguard Cave to be more precise. While studying this area, scientists stumbled upon a small hearth that may have functioned as something close to an ancient adhesive workshop. So chances are that Neanderthals were using fire not just for warmth or cooking, but as a controlled tool for producing useful materials. Now, let's see how this hearth worked. If you've ever cooked sauces, you know how they thicken once the temperature goes up. Neanderthals may have spotted something similar while using fire for its basic function, cooking. They put two and two together, and bam! They started glue, or rather, tar production. The controlled fire helped them regulate heat precisely enough to produce a perfectly sticky texture. That tar could then be used to fasten stone blades or other sharp pieces onto wooden handles, with sinew or plant fibers helping secure the joint. If you wonder what the recipe was, scientists managed to reconstruct it, sort of. Basically, it involved burned rock rose leaves, but there was a secret ingredient for the process to work: guano. Guano is what's left of bat and bird feces once they've decayed. It sounds quite disgusting, but it worked, and that's what matters. Let's check out the structure itself. It's quite small. A round pit roughly 9 inches across and about 3.5 inches deep. Its walls are sharply cut, and 2 narrow trenches extend outward to the north and south. The working idea is that Neanderthals packed the pit with rock rose leaves, then sealed it with damp sand and soil, likely mixed with, you guessed it, guano, to limit oxygen entering the chamber. A small fire, probably fueled by grasses and shrubs, would have burned above the sealed pit. As the plant material heated, it released a thick brown resin. Producing that resin required temperatures in the neighborhood of 300 degrees Fahrenheit or more. However, it took scientists some effort to understand what happened inside the hearth. They had to analyze residues from the walls and floor using several chemical techniques, including mass spectrometry. This technique identifies and counts molecules within a sample. It was necessary to reconstruct the likely production method. Once they ran those smart tests, they moved on to the next step, which involved a tad of elbow grease. They recreated the setup themselves, building experimental hearths that matched the original in size, shape, and materials. In 4 test runs, the recreated hearths successfully produced resin, which supported the proposed explanation. Alright, it feels like those prehistoric production lines prove that Neanderthals were much cooler than we thought. A typical idea is that Neanderthals were just wandering hunters, but they probably were not. And it's not only about their production setups. There may be evidence suggesting they organized coordinated hunts that lured wild horses into traps roughly 200,000 years ago. We go back to Germany once again. At the archaeological site of Schöningen, researchers uncovered wooden spears, double-pointed sticks, stone tools, and the butchered remains of more than 50 horses of different ages. After a couple of tests, scientists realized these finds are about 100,000 years younger than earlier estimates. The material was excavated in the 1990s from sediments along what used to be a lakeshore. With the updated dating, scientists think the site reflects a period when Neanderthals were already living across Europe. Zoo archaeologists argue that these hunters could understand horse behavior well enough to organize group hunts, steering entire horse families toward carefully chosen ambush points. Yikes! Chances are that by about 200,000 years ago, Neanderthals were cooperating in increasingly complex ways. Organized hunting, shared planning, and coordinated action may have been part of their social life, and they could have possibly reached levels similar to those seen in early Homo sapiens communities. Earlier estimates placed the Shonengan tools and horse remains at roughly 300,000 years old. There were no labels, of course, so scientists had to turn to pollen preserved in the sediment layers, which they used to match local vegetation changes with known global climate cycles. Under that older timeline, the hunters at the site might have been Neanderthal ancestors or another ancient human species known as Homo heidelbergensis. But the new timeline points more directly to Neanderthals themselves. To refine the age of the site, a team of scientists analyzed how amino acids, the chemical components of proteins, had gradually changed structure after passing. They examined 4 snail shells, 15 tiny crustaceans, and 8 horse teeth from the same sediment layer that contained the spears. Once they measured these molecular changes and combined the results with pollen records and climate data, the researchers calculated how much time had passed since those organisms died. The results consistently pointed to a younger age, around 200,000 years, placing Neanderthals squarely in the role of the hunters behind the Shonengan horse drives. The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's fresh water, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process. Scientists found a new statue on Easter Island inside the crater of an old volcano. They were sure they already cataloged all the moai. That's what they call those famous stone giants. But this discovery changes what we know about them. First of all, the moai were rarely alone, so we may hear about more of them in the same area. Second, it's the first moai found at the bottom of a lake. Scientists were working on a project to restore the marshland in the volcano's crater when they stumbled upon the statue. The lake that was here began to dry up in 2018. For at least 200 or 300 years, it was almost 10 feet deep, so it would be impossible for humans to build or put a statue on the bottom. Scientists think the moai are over 500 years old. It's possible that the Rapa Nui people who built them probably brought the statue here when the lake was dry in the past. The new find turned out to be slightly over 5 feet tall, which is smaller than the other statues on the island. It's a full-bodied one with recognizable features. Researchers also plan to do radiocarbon dating to find out the exact age of the statue. They don't plan to remove it from where it was found because the oldest members of the Rapa Nui community want it to stay where it is. Moai statues kept scientists puzzled for centuries. They knew that they were built as a dedication to the island's chiefs, but no one could figure out why they chose these various locations for the statues. Most of them were found along the coast of the island. Researchers from Binghamton University in New York decided to study the locations more closely and learned that it had to do with water. Easter Island has porous volcanic soil that absorbs rain easily, so there aren't enough streams or rivers and too little fresh water. Hundreds of years ago, the island's people relied on groundwater discharge to get drinking water. The water stored deep underground in rock or soil layers, called aquifers, reach a point where it flows up to the surface. When this underground water emerges near the coast, it mixes with the salty seawater, but the salt level remains low enough that the water is safe to drink. The islanders used to collect this water directly from the spots where it flowed out. And it looks like that's why they built the moai along the coast, right near their most important water source. The main bodies of most of the statues were made of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. This material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages. It looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their sculptors detached them from the rock, moved them downslope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. When it was done, it was time to move the statue to its platform. And we're talking about moving statues that weighed around half as much as a single-story, unfurnished house without a car or any modern equipment for 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original transportation method. Scientists tried to recreate it and pulled moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone would have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This sounds legit, because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researchers Catherine Rutledge found an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were there exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the way for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues reached their final destinations because they were all set on hidden platforms. The road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. Scientists used to believe that the Rapa Nui people made Easter Island unlivable and ruined their own civilization. But a new study that used remote sensing data and machine learning says that the island's population didn't grow too big and collapse. Instead, the islanders figured out how to live in this challenging place and kept their population small and steady for hundreds of years. Researchers found amazing rock gardens as proof for this new theory. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is one of the most remote places on Earth where people live. It's surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Central Chile is 2,200 miles to the east of it, and French Polynesia is 2,600 miles to the west. The island, which is 63 square miles in size, is made entirely of volcanic rock. But the volcano stopped erupting a long time ago. So, Rapa Nui's soil has lost most of the useful nutrients that lava once brought here. It's also drier than tropical islands, and its deep waters made fishing much harder for the settlers, as there's no shallow lagoons or reefs to fish in. So, the islanders came up with a smart farming method called rock gardening to survive here. They spread rocks of different sizes over the soil and planted crops like sweet potatoes and taro between the rocks. The rocks protected the plants from harsh winds and salty air and helped regulate the soil's temperature. They also slowly released minerals into the soil, so it became healthier for growing food. Some islanders still use these gardens, although they don't produce a lot of food. People in places like New Zealand, the Canary Islands, and the US Southwest have used similar techniques to grow crops in uneasy environments. While scientists are solving Easter Island mysteries, the island itself is teaching them something new about how the Earth's mantle works. For years, they thought it moved like a slow conveyor belt, carrying tectonic plates along with it. But a new study by geologists from Cuba, Colombia, and the Netherlands is challenging this idea. They used a special method called zircon dating to figure out the island's age. Zircons are tiny crystals that form when magma cools, and they have traces of uranium inside that turns into lead over time. So, the scientists measured this change to tell the age of zircons. And they were shocked when they saw that some zircons were way older than expected, around 165 million years old. The island itself is only 2.5 million years old. The scientists found that these ancient zircons came from deep inside the mantle, under the tectonic plate, by magma from earlier volcanic activity. Easter Island's volcanoes are part of a group called hotspot volcanoes, formed by hot plumes of rock rising from deep within the Earth. Normally, these plumes stay in one spot while the Earth's crust moves above them and creates a chain of islands, like Hawaii. But the discovery of ancient zircons on a younger island shows there's more going on deep underground than we thought. Research showed that 165 million years ago, a giant volcanic plateau existed where Easter Island is now. But 110 million years ago, it sank under Antarctica because of tectonic subduction. Ancient zircon minerals stayed put and didn't travel away with the mantle conveyor belt. So, it looks like the mantle near hotspot plumes doesn't flow as much as scientists used to think. It stays still. This new idea could lead to big changes in how we understand plate tectonics and how the Earth's inside moves over time. The ocean had a king 190 million years ago, and that creature was just the size of a dolphin. But it still kept everyone else in fear. a fossil collector found its relics in the rock at England's famous Jurassic Coast near a place called Golden Cap in Dorset back in 2001. For centuries before that day, people just walked over it and never noticed this treasure. Then, it traveled all the way to a museum in Ontario, Canada. But it was still there until, in late 2025, scientists realized they weren't looking at just another sea reptile, but at something unique, the only known specimen of its species. The find received a nickname, the Sword Dragon of Dorset, and got the attention of the scientific world. Ichthyosaurus, the group this animal belongs to, spent their lives in the ocean, but they don't have much in common with fish. Think of them as the marine equivalent of dinosaurs' cousins. For millions of years, they ruled the seas the way sharks and whales dominate today. But the sword dragon didn't have much in common with those bad guys. This creature stretched just about 10 feet long and had a pretty unusual appearance. Many ichthyosaurs had thick skulls and strong jaws, which were just perfect for crushing prey. Instead, evolution gave our guy an incredibly long, narrow snout attached to a high-speed body. Researchers think it used that snout to slash through schools of fish and squid and to stun or slice prey before swallowing it. And the eyes of our sword dragon worked like giant camera lenses. They pulled in every bit of light available, so the animal could see in places where most predators would be almost blind. And in the ocean, where sunlight doesn't travel very far underwater, it's a huge advantage. Fish, squid, and other prey drifted through the gloom, thinking they had some cover from danger, and our dragon could spot them without a problem. It also had a pretty unusual skull. Most animals, including us humans, have a small bone near the nostril area called the lacrimal bone. Normally, it's nothing special, but on the sword dragon, it had odd little prong-like projections sticking out from it, something paleontologists had never seen on any other ichthyosaur before. In paleontology, those tiny details are everything. They become clues that tell scientists they're not looking at a completely new species that lived millions of years ago. The sword dragon skeleton survived in almost perfect shape and preserved its three-dimensional form, not flattened like many other fossils. Scientists even think traces of the creature's last meal still sit inside its remains. So, one moment this animal hunted fish in Jurassic waters, and the next moment it froze in time, with its final lunch locked inside stone for 190 million years. The story got even more interesting once scientists began studying the bones carefully. Some limb bones and teeth have strange deformities, which means the animal suffered injuries or disease while it lived. The skull also has bite marks from a much larger predator, probably another ichthyosaur. That beast likely delivered the final blow. But the biggest reason scientists care about this animal so much is that it fills a massive gap in the fossil record. Fossils from the time period when it lived, around 193 to 184 million years ago, show up very rarely. Before this discovery, paleontologists saw two completely different groups of ichthyosaurs in the fossil record: older ones before this period and newer ones after it. But no one knew exactly when or how that change happened. So, the sword dragon enters the story like a missing puzzle piece. This creature looked more closely related to later species that appeared millions of years afterward. That means the big evolutionary shift in ichthyosaurs likely started earlier than scientists thought. Now, let's leave the ocean and jump to a completely different landscape. One that once baked under the brutal sun of the Sahara. Around 95 million years ago, a predator walked there that looked just as strange as the sword dragon, but it chased prey on land and in rivers instead of the sea. The scientists who led the discovery described this animal as a hell heron. It stretched as long as a school bus and weighed several tons. Its skull had long crocodile-like jaws filled with conical teeth, so it could easily grip slippery fish for lunch. But the really weird part was a crest on its head shaped like a curved blade, a scimitar. It looked so unusual that scientists didn't even recognize the species when they first uncovered the bones in 2019. They only understood what they had after they returned to the site in 2022 and collected more fossils. Researchers find Spinosaurs in rocks that formed near ancient coastlines, which clearly shows us that those creatures took their food from the sea. But this one turned up hundreds of miles from any prehistoric sea. The land around it once had forests and rivers instead of desert dunes. That means this giant predator probably went into freshwater ecosystems to look for food there, instead of coastal waters. So it looks like this massive dinosaur was wading through water up to 6.5 feet deep, standing on sturdy legs while scanning the surface for fish. Instead of diving like a crocodile, it likely waited patiently and then snapped its jaws shut in a lightning-fast strike. More than 200 million years ago, another strange survivor swam through freshwater lakes and slow-moving rivers in what is now Zimbabwe, an extinct species of lungfish. Unlike most fish, lungfish can actually breathe air. They have organs that function like primitive lungs, which allows them to gulp oxygen directly from the atmosphere when water becomes too stagnant or low in oxygen. In a way, they live between two worlds, part fish, part early experiment in the transition toward land animals. And that superpower makes lungfish really important to scientists. They are the closest living relatives to the ancient ancestors of all four-limbed animals. There used to be a gap in our knowledge of these creatures, but the new discovery helped fill it. Now we know that many lungfish may be more closely related than they used to think, and scientists can now better understand how these creatures survived for hundreds of millions of years. In a way, lungfish are one of evolution's masterpieces. This ancient blueprint kept working when entire worlds of species were born and vanished around them. Now let's travel even further back in time, way before dinosaurs ruled the planet. Around 275 million years ago, another bizarre creature swam through freshwater lakes in what is now Brazil. Researchers discovered the species from 9 fossilized lower jaws, each about 6 inches long. Instead of pointing upward like normal teeth, this creature's teeth stuck out sideways. Every single jaw had the same strange design, which proved the twist wasn't a mistake, but the way the animal evolved. The inside surface of the jaw had tiny tooth-like bumps called denticles. These structures formed a grinding surface, so the creature had its own built-in food processor. Scientists think it used that unusual mouth to chew small invertebrates, or maybe even plant material. That's a pretty unusual diet for an animal whose close relatives were mostly carnivores. And speaking of its family, this bizarre creature belonged to an extremely ancient lineage called stem tetrapods. Those were early four-limbed vertebrates that gave rise to modern reptiles, birds, mammals, and amphibians. By the time Caño lived, most of those early lineages had already disappeared. Yet this one somehow survived, and newer, more modern animals evolved around it. Scientists call this kind of animal a living fossil. When researchers analyzed the fossils, they made the conclusion that this mysterious creature grew up to about 3 feet long and probably resembled a salamander with a longer snout. It swam through lakes in a world where the continents still formed the giant supercontinent Gondwana. This discovery is also important because it helps scientists understand how ancient ecosystems functioned and which animals filled different roles in those early communities.
We just brought an extinct animal back to life. Imagine hearing a sound that hasn't existed on Earth for 10,000 years. A deep howl echoing across a frozen valley. A sound that disappeared long before the pyramids were built, before cities, before recorded history. For the first time in human history, we might be able to bring back traits of animals that went extinct thousands of years ago. Not through magic, not through cloning dinosaurs like in Jurassic Park, but through something much stranger. Rewriting the DNA of living animals using the genetic code of the dead. One of the species often mentioned in this conversation is the direwolf, a massive predator that disappeared roughly 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. It looked like a wolf, but bigger, heavier, and built for hunting ice age megafauna. And now scientists are asking a question that would have sounded impossible just a few decades ago. What if extinction isn't always permanent? For most of human history, extinction meant the absolute end of a species. Once the last individual died, that was it. The genetic instructions that defined that animal, millions or billions of letters of DNA, slowly broke apart over time. All that remained were bones, fossils, and sometimes fragments of genetic material trapped in ice or sediment. But in the last 20 years, scientists have developed tools that allow them to do something extraordinary. They can read ancient DNA and not dot small pieces. In some cases, researchers can reconstruct nearly complete genomes from animals that died thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of years ago. One of the most famous examples is the woolly mammoth. Frozen mammoth remains discovered in Arctic permafrost are sometimes so well preserved that scientists can recover large amounts of genetic material from them. Well, to give you an idea of the scale, a mammoth genome contains roughly 4 billion DNA letters. That's about the same amount of genetic information as humans. Reconstructing that genome is like trying to assemble a shredded encyclopedia, except the pages are frozen inside bones buried in ice for 10,000 years. But reading the DNA is only the beginning. The real challenge is turning that information into a living organism. And that's where modern biotechnology enters the story. Instead of trying to clone a mammoth directly, which isn't possible with damaged ancient DNA, scientists use a different strategy. They compare the genome of the extinct animal with the genome of its closest living relative. In the case of mammoths, that relative is the Asian elephant. The two species are surprisingly similar. Their DNA is more than 99% identical. That means the genetic differences responsible for mammoth traits, thick fur, cold-resistant blood, fat layers, are hidden inside a relatively small number of genes. Scientists can identify those genes, and with gene editing tools like CRISPR, they can insert some of those traits into elephant DNA. The result wouldn't be a perfect mammoth. Instead, it would be something closer to a mammoth-like elephant, an animal carrying some of the key biological adaptations of the extinct species. According to the de-extinction process described by researchers working on mammoth restoration, the workflow follows several steps. First, scientists collect mammoth DNA from frozen remains found in places like Siberia and Alaska. Next, they sequence multiple mammoth genomes to understand which genes controlled cold adaptation traits. Then those genes are edited into elephant cells using CRISPR. If those modified cells develop successfully into embryos, they could eventually grow inside elephant surrogates, or possibly artificial womb systems being developed today. If everything works, the result could be animals capable of surviving in environments where mammoths once lived. But why attempt something this complicated in the first place? Part of the answer lies in climate science. During the Ice Age, mammoths were not just large animals wandering the tundra. They were ecosystem engineers. Imagine millions of giant herbivores moving across northern Eurasia. Each mammoth could weigh 6 tons, roughly the same as a large truck. As they moved, they knocked down trees, trampled snow, and grazed on vegetation. Over thousands of years, this constant activity helped maintain vast grasslands known as the Mammoth Steppe. At its peak, this ecosystem stretched across an area larger than the modern United States. And it may have played an important role in regulating the Arctic climate. Today, Arctic permafrost stores an enormous amount of carbon, around 1,600 billion metric tons. That's roughly twice as much carbon as currently exists in Earth's atmosphere. If that frozen ground melts, massive amounts of greenhouse gases could be released. Some scientists believe large grazing animals might help slow that process. By trampling snow and promoting grasslands, they could help keep the ground colder. In other words, bringing mammoth-like animals back might not just recreate an extinct species, it might help stabilize entire Arctic ecosystems, at least in theory. Of course, not everyone agrees this is a good idea. Introducing genetically engineered animals into modern ecosystems raises a lot of questions. For example, what happens if these animals behave differently than expected, or if they reproduce faster than the ecosystem can support, or if they spread diseases to existing wildlife? Even small ecological changes can have cascading effects. For example, when wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park in the 1990s, the entire ecosystem changed, from deer populations to river patterns. Now imagine introducing animals that haven't existed for 10,000 years. the ecological consequences could be unpredictable. There is also another concern scientists often discuss. It's sometimes called the moral hazard of de-extinction. The idea is simple. If people start believing that extinct species can always be brought back later, they might feel less urgency to protect endangered species today. Why worry about extinction if science can reverse it? However, studies examining public attitudes suggest the situation may be more complicated. Simply knowing about de-extinction doesn't necessarily make people more comfortable with species disappearing. But scientists still emphasize something important. De-extinction cannot truly reverse extinction. Even with advanced gene editing, recreating an identical species is extremely unlikely. What scientists can create are genetic approximations, animals that resemble extinct species and may play similar ecological roles, but they are not perfect copies of the past. And yet, the technologies developed for de-extinction may still have enormous value. The same genetic tools could help scientists protect endangered animals today. For example, gene editing could potentially increase genetic diversity in small populations, or help species adapt to changing climates. In other words, the real legacy of de-extinction might not be resurrecting lost species. It might be preventing future extinctions. For thousands of years, extinction seemed like a one-way door. Once a species passed through it, there was no way back. But modern biotechnology is beginning to challenge that assumption. Scientists are not bringing Ice Age animals back exactly as they once were, but for the first time in history, we may be able to restore parts of their biology, and maybe even parts of the ecosystems they once shaped. And that leaves us with a question humanity has never had to answer before. If we gain the power to partially reverse extinction, how carefully should we use it?
They were digging a well when they hit something that made them stop mid-swing. Their shovels struck stone, and as they cleared the dirt away, the farmers saw blocks, lined up like bricks in a fortress wall. It happened in Texas in 1852. But to this day, there's no single explanation for something that looks like a secret buried city beneath quiet streets and front lawns. The diggers who found the well said that the structure stretched for miles. In some places, it dropped dozens of feet below the surface. The stones looked strangely orderly, almost like someone had stacked them, and in certain places, the shapes even formed arches. Other sections looked like windows or steps climbing upward. Before long, people started calling it the Great Wall of Texas, and the story spread quickly. Farmers, builders, and curious locals all grabbed shovels and started digging around, hoping to figure out what it really was. And that's when they noticed that the blocks seemed separated by seams that looked suspiciously like mortar. It was really hard to believe that nature could stack limestone into right angles and parallel lines like this. Then, things got even stranger. In 1886, a local newspaper wrote about a massive petrified skull found near the wall. They also mentioned underground chambers, lost rooms beneath Texas soil, and relics of something powerful and old. And then, almost as quickly as it appeared, the story vanished from print. There were no follow-up articles, no skull preserved in a museum, no official investigation that anyone could point to. It was as if the story had quietly slipped out of existence. People got even more intrigued and wanted to know if someone had suppressed all the info about the find on purpose. Someone suggested that some powerful institutions had quietly removed artifacts. Over time, theories piled up. Lost civilizations, ancient giants, even a North American counterpart to the Great Pyramid. But then, modern science stepped in with drilling rigs. Geologists drilled deep into the formation and pulled out samples of the rock. Then, they ran paleomagnetic tests. When rocks form, tiny magnetic minerals inside them line up with Earth's magnetic field at that moment, almost like microscopic compass needles frozen in place. If workers had cut these blocks somewhere else, maybe dug them out of a quarry, and then transported and assembled them into a wall, the magnetic patterns inside the rocks would have pointed in different directions. Each block would carry the signature of the place where it originally formed, but every sample had the same magnetic orientation, which means the stone formed exactly where it sits today. Researchers figured out the wall was made of rare limestone. This material can fracture in surprisingly straight lines as it hardens underground. Over long periods, erosion opens up those fractures, and they can look exactly like human-made walls. It's like mud. When it dries, it splits into neat geometric patterns. Now imagine the same process happening underground, slowly over millions of years on a much larger scale. Today, the scientists are sure that the rock wall formation developed naturally. It only seems constructed by humans. Recently, a family whose ancestors were early rock wall settlers donated a piece of land to the city that has the original site where the wall was excavated. And because the interest in the place lives on, the city authorities plan to make the original wall accessible to the public. The rock wall isn't alone. In 1968, 3 divers spotted large rectangular limestone blocks near North Bimini in the Bahamas. The blocks were in a straight line stretching about a half a mile. Divers called it the Bimini Road. It consists of massive angular blocks of limestone. Some of those blocks are up to 13 feet long. Many of the blocks look like they once had right-angled corners, as if someone cut them and placed them there with purpose. The 3 divers found this construction when the world buzzed with interest in Atlantis. So headlines immediately connected the dots and were seriously asking whether this could be the first physical trace of Plato's legendary civilization. We still don't have any archaeological evidence to confirm it actually existed, but the timing and the shape of the Bimini stones made many people believe that was it. But then, geologists explained that beach rock forms when sand, shell fragments, and other coastal sediments cement together in warm, shallow water. The Bimini blocks consist of small mud pellets, grains of sand, shell pieces, remains of tiny single-celled marine organisms, and fragments of algae. Over time, chemical reactions bound these materials into solid limestone sheets. Natural fractures split the sheets into rectangular blocks. As sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, water gradually submerged the formation. Waves and currents eroded the sand beneath parts of it and made some blocks look slightly elevated or recessed. Then, researchers did radiocarbon dating on rock samples, shells embedded with them, and the carbonate cement holding everything together. That's how they found out that the stones were roughly 2,000 years old. It's way after Atlantis' supposed demise 12,000 years ago. So no, the Bimini Road doesn't lead to Atlantis. But it helped scientists better understand how coastlines evolve, how sediment hardens, and how rising seas reshape continents. There's another mysterious structure that might have to do with Atlantis. Meet the Eye of the Sahara, or more officially, the Richat structure in Mauritania. From space, it looks like a 25-mile-wide bullseye carved into the desert. Concentric rings ripple outward like someone dropped a cosmic pebble. People who saw it first thought it was a spot left by a meteor impact. And a new theory links it to Atlantis. They say it looks exactly how Plato described it, with a center island with 3 rings of water and 3 rings of land around it. The Eye of the Sahara sits totally dry right now, but imagine if you dropped it down to sea level. Ocean water would rush in and fill those dips, and boom, you get something that looks a whole lot like Plato's famous city. On top of that, the size seems pretty close. Plato said the main part of Atlantis measured about 11 miles across, and the Richat structure measures roughly 13 miles wide. But wait, Atlantis famously sank into the ocean, so for this to work, the eye had to sit right at sea level a long time ago. The fans of this idea claim that this whole chunk of Northwest Africa slowly pushed upward over the last 11,000 years. They say it sat right at the ocean's edge way back around 9,600 BCE, which is exactly when Plato's story takes place. To back this up, they point out tons of salt inside the rings in satellite pictures, saying this proves ocean water used to sit right there. They also see sand all around the eye that looks like a giant wave washed over it. A huge wave like that would totally wipe out any city sitting there, just like the wave that supposedly sank Atlantis. It all sounds pretty convincing, but actual scientists and historians totally disagree. Because when you look closely, the facts just fall apart. Yes, the eye has 3 clear ridges, but if you measure all 3, the whole thing stretches way bigger than 13 miles. On the flip side, if you only measure out to 13 miles, you have to leave out the third ridge entirely. So it doesn't actually match Plato's description perfectly, since you simply can't have it both ways. Modern satellite images show that the eye formed from uplifted rock layers that were pushed upward by molten material beneath the surface. Wind and water erosion then peeled back those layers like an onion over at least 100 million years. The oldest rocks sit in the center. Younger layers ring outward. It's a geological dome, not a crater, not a city. Inside the structure, scientists found igneous rocks, hardened magma, and sedimentary layers twisted by immense pressure. Hot water chemically changed the rocks and left additional signatures. Ancient stone tools also scatter across the region, showing that early humans once passed through. This site is now among the most significant geological heritage locations on Earth.